Welcome back. In this tutorial, we are going to talk about connecting with our JPA and Hibernate database. We have a controller here and we have a bean here that work as a user table or an entity with the primary key and all of the columns with their restrictions on it. Okay, so as we have a restriction, age should be between 8 and 18 and 125 and keep on going like that. Okay, so we have all of the restrictions on it and our entity table is ready. Now we are going to basically create, first of all we are going to create our repository, which will be a JPA repository, so that we can use it to use the CRUD operations on our database, like create or modify or update or delete or view. Okay, so to do that, in our services package we create a class. You can name it anything, like I will say basically it is an interface, not a class, so I will make it like a user bean repository. That repository will be used to, first of all it is a interface. Okay, that repository will be used in our, like, doing all of the operations. Okay, I will tell you about that operation. So first of all we will make it a repository. Okay, and then okay, and then I will extend it with a JPA repository and mark that we have a user bean v1 and a integer as our primary key in it. Okay, so I will just import this one and you can see that we have that thing. That if you want, you can just remove the repository. It is not necessary because we already told that it is extending from a JPA repository. When we open the JPA repository, you can see we have many methods here, like flush, save and flush, save all and flush, and delete all in batches, and a few other methods. And it is also extending the other list CRUD repository. Here it has many operations like save all, find all by ID, and even we have CRUD repository here, which is save all, find by ID, exist by ID, find all by ID, and count. We have many methods here. We do not have to create each of the methods one by one for the table. Like if I want to find if I want to extract the rows for specific user, I do not have to create each and every method for them. I can simply use that user bin repository interface and I can do all of the stuff. For that thing I have to auto wire it in our controller. So we will do auto wired and private user bean repository. Okay, so we have a user bean repository here. We can use it and do all of the operations on it. For before doing that, I have to do some of the configurations on my project, so that I can use the Hibernate database and do view the all of this stuff and do the changes on it. For that purpose I have to open the resources here, and then in the application.properties file I will open it. Okay, so we have a few of the properties here which are already exist, and now we will create a few other properties here. So as you know, if we work on a MySQL database, we have to set up the URL, we have to set up the driver which we are going to use, and then we have to set up the username, password, and other configurations for that thing. Okay, so we will do all of that stuff here. So first of all we are going to do h2 database configuration. Okay, so we are going to do this configuration. First of all, the first configuration is to set up the URL for that thing. Okay, so I will say what we have to use. We will use spring dot data source dot url. So basically data source is like a database, so we are setting the configuration for a spring dot data source dot url is, we will say it is jdbc, and then we are going to use h2, and then it is a memory based database with a name testdb. Okay, so we have that configuration in it, in which we say the spring.datasource.url means the URL of a data source in the Spring is JDBC, which is a Java, basically a database management thing, in which we have a H2 database, and H2 is a memory based database, and the name of the database is a testdb. Okay, now we have to do some of the main basically simple configurations for that for the database link. If you want, you can do it. If you don't want, it is not necessary to do that. I will just say that db close delay is -1. Okay, and db close on exit is false. Okay, so on else it will, on false it will not exit. Okay, so these are the few of the flags. If you want to put it, you can do that. If you don't want to put it, it is not necessary. I just told you for a reference. Now we have to set up the driver for our database, and in case of the driver we will use the h2 driver, which is basically a org.h2.driver. Okay, so in our MySQL, like we have a connectors, MySQL connector with the Java and other things, but in the Spring we use the h2 driver with it. And to set up the driver, we will use, again basically we have to change all of this stuff for the data source in the Spring. Here I will use spring dot data source dot driver class name. Okay, so basically it is a driver class name which we are going to use. As I told you, it is a org.h2.driver. Okay, so basically D is like capital here. Okay, so we have the driver here, and we have two configurations ready. Now the next, basically you do not need to put the semicolons at the end. If you want, you can do that, it depends on you. But now we have to set up the another configurations for it, which is for username. As you know, I have told you all of the configurations are for the spring.datasource, and the other is one spring.datasource.username, and you will name it SA. You can name it anything. I will just name it system admin. S means a system admin. You can name it anything. Basically, if you just go here on a spring.data source, you can see what are the properties does it allow. Okay, you can click on with a control and click and data source. Okay, and just zoom it back, and when I go above, you can see that we have a data source properties with a, it has a configuration properties with the prefix spring.data source. Okay, so it says that any changes we can do using a spring.data source and then dot that name. Okay, so we have all of the values here which we are going to change, like a username, like a password, and driver class name, all of these things, and these are here explained below. Okay, let's say like this one, we have the set driver class name, we have like a set username, okay, and set password. Okay, basically we are doing that here, dot username dot url, and instead of like that in the properties we use that thing to differentiate between the objects or between in the words. Okay, now for the username, as I told, it is a system admin SA. You can name it anything. Now for the password property, which is this one, we are going to set the now password here. For our data source, I will say spring dot data source dot my password. Okay, you can name it anything, you can put any password for it. For currently I am just making it an empty database. Okay, or empty password, sorry. We have that complete configurations that is for our h2 database, so that we can connect it to the database. To do the connection with the database, we have the url, class name, username, password, and about creating the schema of the database, that entity will do all of this stuff. It will automatically create a table and a schema for us. Okay, now we have to do a little configurations for our hibernate, which are called as a hibernate configurations. Okay, in that Hibernate configurations, basically these are for the JPA Hibernate, and we will use the basically we will set up our platform what we are going to use, and we will say that DDL auto thing, like it should automatically create all of the DDL thing like a schema and all of the tables, and it should allow us to show the SQL and like that thing. We have to set up these configurations here. So we will write spring dot jpa dot database platform. Okay, so this is a jpa dot database platform. Here if you want, you can see that here we have a jpa properties here with a prefix spring dot jpa, and these are the jpa properties which are database platform database and generate DDL. We have to make that true, and we have to make that SQL true, so that we it help us to do all of the logging of the SQL statement, and that generate DDL will automatically initialize the schema on startup for us. We do not have to do anything, and we have to set up our database platform. Here we have to set up these following properties. So we will say spring.jpa.database platform, and we will are going to use h2 dialect for that thing. We will say org. Basically we are passing in the class for that org.hibernate.dialect.h2 dialect. Okay, so this is the database platform which we are going to use for the for our Hibernate, and for our DDL auto, basically, which is this one, generate DDL. Okay, so we have to set the property for it. We will use spring.jpa dot Hibernate. Okay, you can see that we have Hibernate.ddl auto here. Okay, these are for the Hibernate properties, and these are here spring.jpa.hibernate. We have the properties here for our DDL auto. Okay, and we will use it like here, DDL auto is equal to create. Okay, we are saying create them. Okay, and now we have spring.jpa.show SQL, which I showed you before. It is true. Okay, so all of the Hibernate and database configurations are complete. In the h2 configuration, you can see that we have the URL, driver, username, password, everything here. And for the Hibernate configuration, we have a platform. We have set up that it should automatically create all of the DDL stuff like tables and all thing, and it should show the SQL here. Okay, everything is ready. Now we will go to our okay, wait a second, we will go to our main social media application and run the application here. Okay, so as you know that our spring application is running in correctly here, and you can see that our all of the platform for Hibernate.dialect and Hibernate environment, everything is complete and ready to use. And you can also see that as we have made the property of this one of DDL auto create, so we do not have to create a schema file, else you have to create source dot schema file here, like you have to create a SQL file with a schema.sql, and you have to put all of the SQL statements here to do that all of the stuff. But currently we are not using that thing. We are using the DDL auto, so it will do all of this stuff for us. As you can see that it says drop table if exists user bean v1, like in the entity we said that we have that table, and it will drop it if it exists, else it will create a new table. Okay, now let's see. We have that entity here, and we have said that id is a primary key, and first name has a maximum size of 75, and the column name is first name. So you can see that we have first of all the age with a integer check. The age should be greater than equal to 18 and should be less than equal to 125. Okay, so you can see that we have the implementations and restrictions on the age here. Okay, and it has the id integer generated by default as identity. Okay, so it says that our id will be auto generated, and it should be greater than equal to 0. Okay, and first name, which is avarchar 75, not null. Okay, how it knows that it is first name varchar not null? It sees from our validations here, like this is the first name, we said it is not null and it is not blank. This is the pattern for it, this is the size for it. Size should be maximum of 75, and the column should be in first name, so that's why it's make it first name and a varchar with the 75 and make it not null. Okay, you can see that it did the same thing for our last name here, and we did first same validations for the last name, which is a varchar 75 not null. And in the email you can see that in our first name or the last name we set the maximum 75, and in the email we set it for the 100, so it showed the same thing here. The email is, sorry, the email is varchar 100 not null, and the street address is again 125 varchar not null, and the primary key is a id. So it did all of the things here. Now we are going to basically our all of the Hibernate connection and each and everything is done here. Now we are going to open the user interface for our database. To do that, we have to go to the our browser and do localhost 8080 and then /h2 console. Okay, and click on enter. You will see the console here, and you can see that the details are automatically extracted from our configuration file. Here you can see our configuration file is here, and so we set up the URL this one, and the driver this one, username this one, and the password is empty. You can see that we have each and everything here. We have the same driver here, we have the same URL here, username and password. You just have to click on the connect, and you can see it is connected. So we are on our h2 console, and you can do many stuff on that console. For first of all, you can see we have a user bean v1 here, which is automatically generated for us. Okay, when you open it, you can see we have different columns, which are 1 2 3 4 5 6 columns. These are the same columns which we have created before, and when you click on select static from user bean v1 and run it, you can see that we have the following columns here. Now if you want to insert the values inside of it, you can do it using an insert statement, like insert into user bean v1, and values are basically, I think it put the age first, then id, then all of these things, and I will do the same as below. So the age is, let's say, 25, and the id is auto generated, but we can say it is id1, and the first name is Rehan, last name is Javed. Okay, and email is rehan@mail.com, and street address is, let's say, United States. Okay, so when we run this query, okay, so it says that that query is executed and update count 1, so it is updated. Now we will run a query which is select static from user bean v1 and run it. Okay, so you can see that we have a entry here, and we have a 25 age, we have a id, we have the first name, last name, email address, and street address. Now I will create a one more entry. So we have some hard-coded database data. We will use it in our next lecture, in which we have to get our resources from the database. Okay, I will insert one or two queries for it. Insert into user bean v1 with the values age, let's say 26, id 2, first name King Edward at mail.com, United Kingdom. Okay, we'll just copy this one and run it. Okay, and then I will say the age is 29, id is 3, Lily Jackson lily@mail.com and Canada. Okay, so we have inserted all of the values here. Now if we want to check all the data from our columns, we will say select static from user bean v1 and run it. So we have all of the rows here, but if you want to insert a wrong data, it will not do that. Let's say for the age you will put -10, or the id you will put -10, and try to run it. It will say that the check constant violation, we have violated some constant on it, so it will not accept it. It will only accept the correct values to be inserted into the database. So this is how we will connect our Hibernate database and using the JPA with our project. Okay, so it is ready. In our next lecture we are going to create a get resource using our database.